Hello, everybody. It's Alice Ginsberg again, and I would like to invite you to join me on a Jewish tour of Morocco. Now, I don't know if you can see this real well, but what I'm wearing here is, let's see if you can see this. Here we go. This is a Berber design, and we're going to talk quite a bit about the Berbers in Morocco. And I actually bought that necklace in a place called Aswira, which we will talk about towards the end of this travelogue. But let's start at the beginning. We started our trip, this was in October of 2018, and we started in Casablanca, which you're probably all familiar with from the movie. I have a disappointment for you. The movie is just that, it's a movie. There is a place called Rick's Cafe, which they established in Casablanca after the movie became such a classic, but it's just Rick's Cafe. It's just a restaurant, not where they filmed the movie. So it's a disappointment for some tourists. And it's kind of a rundown, broken down kind of place, by the way. So sorry to burst your bubble on that. However, Casablanca is a fascinating city. It's the largest city in Morocco. On the weekdays, it has about 10 million people. On the weekends, about 4 million people, because about 6 million people live in the outskirts, like in the suburbs of Casablanca. And they commute in to the city for working. Now, Casablanca dates back to 3000 BC. It was originally settled by the Berbers. And as I said, we'll talk about them a bit later. Before 1956, the Jewish population in Morocco was between 250 and 300,000 people. Today, the Jewish population in Morocco is about 2,500 to 3,000 people. There's a good reason for that, which I'll explain later. There's a sizable Jewish quarter, although not like pre-1967, when 40% of Casablanca was Jewish. Many Jewish Moroccans have dual citizenship with Israel or France. Morocco, you need to remember, has always been religiously tolerant. Very important thing to remember. Now, Morocco had a very vibrant Jewish population that was very well integrated into its cultural, educational, and economic fabric. In the late 1950s, socioeconomic changes happened in Morocco, and conditions became very unstable. This was the period in 1954 to 57, something like that, when Morocco was trying to gain its independence from France. So there was a lot of uncertainty over the power of the royalty in Morocco at this time, as they were trying to determine what their government would look like once it was independent from France. And remember, royalty in Moroccan history had always protected the Moroccan Jews. So about this time, when all this turmoil was happening in Morocco, the Jewish agency in Israel was looking to encourage families to send their best and their brightest, their sons and their daughters, to Israel. And most Moroccan families went along with this because of the socioeconomic conditions being so unstable. So after 1956-57, hundreds of thousands of Moroccan Jews emigrated to Israel. And eventually, after the children went, then they would send for their parents and the rest of their families. Now, today, the Moroccans miss their Jewish element very keenly because their socioeconomic fabric has deteriorated considerably without Jewish influence. Today, Morocco is the only Muslim country which welcomes Jews. And it's important to note, Holocaust education is mandatory in Moroccan schools. Now I'm going to share my screen and we'll go through a few photos. Let's see. There. I hope you can see this. This is a very elaborate wall and grate in a place called Dar el Baka, which was formerly a palace in Casablanca. Today, it's a government building. The former owners made their money in the export-import business. The wealth of Morocco today is gained from gold, salt, tourism, and it's the world's largest phosphate producer. So it has the same growing climate as Mexico, which means that there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of need for fertilizer. And of course, phosphate is the major component of fertilizer. So this is the very ornate wall and grate. And this is the up close. You can see the detail in this wall sculpture. And most walls in old cities in Morocco are heavily sculptured, and this is a good example of that. This gives you a sense of the Dar el Baka. And you walk in and you walk through, look at all the detail on the walls and ceilings, and then you walk into the courtyard, and across the courtyard there are more rooms just like this. Here's the courtyard. It's really very beautiful. Most Moroccan courtyards will have a fountain, as you see here. Here we are in the market in Casablanca, and the market has all sorts of stalls: shoes, clothes, tin, metal trays, rugs, trinkets, and then there's the separate area for the butchers. You can buy camel meat, you can buy lamb, you can buy livers, you can buy camel hooves. And we saw wagons like toy wagon fulls, like a toy wagon type of pull mechanism. We saw people pulling those kinds of wagons full of camel hooves through the market. All animal body parts are used. This is an olive store. Look at all the different kinds of olives. And as you see, the local population is shopping. Here we have a produce store. He's filling orders. I think he also sells spices. You can see produce, spices, but look up high on the wall, so above his head, and you'll see containers that look like they're yellow with dark blotches in them. That is meat, which is fresh and stored in heavy fat. In Morocco, $50,000 is considered a very good salary. The average salary in Morocco is about $400 a month. Now, Casablanca is comprised of 9 districts, and every Jewish quarter, there were several Jewish quarters in Casablanca, had its own shul. There used to be 30 shuls in Casablanca. Today, there are 4. This is the one that we went to. And you can see the sanctuary is set up. Chairs on this side, there were chairs on the other side. This is the Aron Kodesh, obviously. And it's a very beautiful synagogue, and it has a lot of engraved sayings, as you see the one above the ark. For example, this is on the ceiling. You can see it's opposite one of the chandeliers. Ma tovu aholacha Yaakov v'shkenotecha Yisrael. How good it is to be in the tent of Jacob as we sit in Mishkenotecha Yisrael. And there are sayings, different sayings, not the same as this, but like this, with the flowers underneath and so on, all around the perimeter of the synagogue, high on the ceiling as you go around. Has magnificent stained glass windows. This one is above the door. You can see this is for the tribe of Gad with the sailing ships. Here's another. And another for Zavulon. And also up in the upper right-hand corner, you could see the inscription again on the ceiling. This was my favorite because I happen to come from the tribe of Levi. Isn't that a magnificent window? Here we have another. It looks like Yosef. And Binyamin at the bottom with the deer. You could barely see the deer, but he is there. He's right there, about a third of the way up the window. And here's another inscription. Yehavat l'reyecha kamocha. You shall love your neighbor as thyself. And this is the front of the synagogue as you go in. Now, as I said, Morocco was Spanish and then French in colonial times. A student chooses whether to study English, French, or Spanish in the public schools. There are some very good Jewish private schools in Casablanca, and when kids are finished with their secondary schooling, people who can afford to do so usually send their kids to France for the university training. Now, our private guide's 2 sons, his name was Mustafa. Mustafa's 2 sons live in Canada, and one is a dentist and the other is a financial analyst for Royal Bank of Canada. So they're doing pretty well. Now, Mustafa had another job before he became a tour guide, but he would not say what that was. He told us that the 2018 economy, when we were there, it was very good. He said there are plenty of jobs. Not many are terrific, great jobs, but there are many, many good jobs available. For our progression through Morocco, after we left Casablanca, we had a Jewish tour guide from Israel who specializes in Morocco, and she had an assistant who was a native Moroccan. And they told us that unemployment in Morocco today is 10%. But our guide, Mustafa, seemed to think that was a pretty good situation economically. Now, Jews lived mainly in Moroccan cities, but they also lived in the mountains among the Berbers. They were mercantilists and, peddlers and shopkeepers. And they also worked in the manual trades of weaving. They worked in metalworking and jewelry because Muslims are not allowed, or at least back then, were not allowed to work in gold or silver by tradition. So another thing to remember is that Jews held prestigious positions in the Moroccan military and in the Moroccan government. They actually commanded Moroccan ships in wartime. Now, Casablanca has the only Jewish museum in a Muslim country. Please think about that. The only Jewish museum in a Muslim country. We were there just after Sukkot, and this was a sukkah that was at the museum. Note the Moorish architecture, the door frame for the sukkah, and they hung rugs for wall ornaments. You can see that on the inside. There was also a Moroccan flag, which I'll explain in a minute. This Jewish museum began as a private home, and in 1948, it was converted to a Jewish orphanage. Murdoch money turned, Murdoch as in Fox News, for example, Rupert Murdoch, turned the building into a museum in 1997, invested quite a lot of money to reframe it from an orphanage to a museum. And the emphasis in this museum is on exhibits dealing with diaspora Jews through the ages. Thing to make note of, the first wave of Jews to Morocco came in 70 AD. The second wave came in the 7th century AD, and the third wave arrived in the 1400s from the Inquisition. The Moroccan flag, as I said, is on one of the walls on the inside of this sukkah. Flying it like this and flying it on the front of this museum is considered a symbol of respect for the king of Morocco. The museum reflects the Moroccan effect on Judaism rather than the Jewish influence on Morocco. For example, in accordance with Moroccan traditions, there have been rabbinic pronouncements against large parties for bar mitzvahs, weddings, even funerals. They don't do large rite of passage or family events. They don't do huge, large parties with outsiders. They may have a large family, but not a large party for outsiders like we do here in the United States. And that's part of the Moroccan influence on Judaism. Here are some of the exhibits in the museum. You can see the fine jewelry. And also, please note that all of the commentary, all of the plaques and all of the explanations, everything is in French. This was a display of Moroccan women's fashions in the Jewish community down through the ages. It was hard to get a good picture since everything is behind glass, and I apologize for that. But you can get some sense of the embroidery and the finery. I mean, look at the embroidery on all of these clothes. It was simply magnificent. Here's a pottery exhibit, and you could see the Hebrew on it. This is a traditional type of Moroccan pottery, but the interesting thing is you have the Moroccan pottery and the Hebrew inscriptions. And here we are at in the huge, and I do mean huge, front courtyard of the King Hassan II Mosque. This is just one building to the side of this courtyard. There's a corresponding building just like this on the other side of the front of this courtyard. The mosque itself is the third largest mosque in the Muslim world, the first being Mecca and the second being in Medina in Saudi Arabia. This particular mosque, the King Hassan II Mosque, is so large it holds 80,000 people on the interior, and then another 50,000 people can gather in the courtyard. So think about that. That's 130,000 people. The mosque was built over 6 years for the glory of God. It is made up of cedar, marble, and titanium. It's 20 years old, and today it takes 200 people to maintain the building and the grounds. It's worthy of note, compulsory tithing is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, and the Moroccan flag has a 5-pointed star on it, symbolizing the 5 pillars of Islam. Here are some more pictures of the King Hassan II Mosque. That is my husband and myself standing in front of a huge mosaic and fountain, and there are several of these in the courtyard. Please look at the detail on the walls and look at the detail of the size of this mosaic, and we're standing there to give you a little bit of scale. This is the detail. This is still part of the courtyard. This is a side door, just the side door. And look at all of the mosaics and the marble and the artwork. We're still in the courtyard. This is the front door. Again, we're still in the courtyard, and you can see just how massive this is. This is the ceiling on the interior. Please look at the detail. This is the ceiling in the King Hassan II Mosque. This is just one part of the ceiling. And this is made of cedar. It's another part of the ceiling. And you can see the detail in the marble. And this gives you some idea of just how magnificent this mosque is. We are sitting about a third of the way into the interior of this mosque. Remember, it was built to the glory of God, of Allah. And this is the royal corridor. When the king comes to pray at this mosque, nobody walks on this corridor except the king and his family as they proceed down to the front of the mosque. This gentleman is standing on the other side of the roped area. He's not standing in the corridor. And this is in the basement of the mosque. This is one of several huge places where the men wash their feet before they go into the mosque. And they put their shoes over here on the rim and they step in, and underneath each of these petals, each of these segments, are faucets for which to wash your feet. This is an example of some of the inscriptions that you see in the mosque. The translation is Allah Akbar, Allah, for the glory of Allah forever. And this gives you an idea of the outside of this mosque. I know it looks like a postcard, but I actually took this picture. I was amazed. You could see the side doors that I showed you before. You could see the massive front door, and you could see just how large this building is. Now remember, there are also those two side buildings that are very large in and of themselves. One is a school, a madrasa, and the other is an archive and library. Here we have a cork tree. You wonder where cork comes from? This is it. You see these in all of the oases in Morocco. After Casablanca, we proceeded to a place called Velu Palace. That's Velu Palace. You can look it up. V as in Victor, O-L-U, B as in boy, I-L-I-S as in Sam. This is a Berber city between Meknes and Fez. You may be familiar with Fez as a city in Morocco, but you probably have not heard of Velu Palace. It's between, as I said, Meknes, which is was a center of Jewish learning, and briefly the capital of Morocco from 1672 until 1727, about 50 years. And then Velu Palace is about halfway between Meknes and Fez. If you think that you're unfamiliar with Berbers, okay, I showed you my necklace. Think of the Hamsa that you see, you know? A Hamsa is a Berber symbol. Now, Velu Palace was built in the 1st century BC and the 1st century AD as the ancient capital of the Kingdom of Mauritania. There were 4 Berber dynasties before the Muslims arrived, and Velu Palace was built by the Idris dynasty, I-D-R-I-S, the Idris dynasty. In the 11th century, this would be in the 1000s now, AD, Velu Palace was abandoned because the seat of power was transferred to Fez. However, you can see, excuse me, you will be able to see in my pictures coming up, you'll be able to see the influence of Roman architecture. We know that Jews lived in Velu Palace because we have excavated tombstones with Hebrew writing. So you can see the Mem, the Nun, and so forth. There's a bet here carved into the stone. There are several tombstones that have been unearthed with Hebrew writing on them. And this is Velu Palace. It is full of mosaics. So this would have been a Roman peristyle with all of the mosaics here and then the rooms along the sides. Probably a banquet hall, I'm thinking. Look at these mosaics. and these have survived since 1000 AD. So, they're at least 2100 years old. This is an olive press that was unearthed in one of the rooms. This timber that you see going through here is for support purposes to keep the building intact. But this is an old ancient olive press. Note the bird's nest on this column. It is a stork's nest. That is why it is so huge. There are stork's nests on many of the columns in Velu Palace. It's a favorite hangout of storks, apparently. More mosaics. I took this picture. You could see the whole valley and the mountains beyond through this Roman arch. And there's a Latin inscription above the arch. There's also a profile of the emperor at the time, one of the Roman emperors. So just to keep your history straight, remember that the Second Temple was destroyed in 70 AD, which was when the first wave of Jews came to Morocco. And the Roman Empire, the common date for its demise is 476 AD. Another mosaic. And this is the city of Fez today. There's an old walled city, and then there is a modern city. The word Fez, by the way, means pickaxe. This city was my favorite of all the places that we visited in Morocco. I would say this and our excursion into the mountains to be among the Berbers. Both of these were absolutely fascinating. I love this city because it has a great mix of commercial vibrance and the old Medina, the old city. Now, the Medina in Moroccan cities, that's the old city. If you hear somebody talking about the Melach, that would be the Jewish quarter. And the Jewish quarter in Moroccan cities is almost always situated very close to the palace because, as I mentioned before, the Moroccan royalty protected its Jews. You find the same phenomenon happening with the Maharajas of India. And when I do a travelogue of India, I'll be pointing that out to you. So the Melach was the Jewish quarter, and it was always close to the king's palace because the monarchy throughout Moroccan history has been protecting the Jews. One thing to note, the European Enlightenment of the 1300s all the way through to the 18th century never reached Morocco. There was no enlightenment here. And we need to keep that in mind as we look at the progression of Jewish history in Morocco. Jewish fortunes waxed and waned, similar to Europe, where in that Jews became very successful economically, and then they would become influential at court. And then the populace would become quite resentful of the Jewish influence at court. And the Jews were caught in the middle. there were persecutions, and they would be downtrodden, and then in the next generation, perhaps they would be starting to build their economic stability once again. It's an up and down wave. If you've ever gone to the Museum of the Diaspora in Jerusalem, that museum illustrates this up and down wave throughout Jewish history extremely well. So let's go into Fez. This is the city, well, part of the city gate in Fez. And again, please note I'm standing there. I'm about 5'5", and you can get a sense of the scale. And there's the whole thing. So I was standing over to the right when I had that picture taken. This is the whole gate to the Medina. We went to a Jewish cemetery in Fez. I think it's really interesting. It says Beit Chayim, the house of life. And here you have Arabic, Hebrew, and French. Cimetière Israélite de Fez, the Israeli cemetery of Fez. And here's an inscription on the wall as you enter the cemetery. You see a lot of this where you have Hebrew inscription and French inscription. And the coffins, the graves are above ground because of the high water table in Morocco. Similar to, say, New Orleans and Florida, you'll see the same thing. Okay, this gives you some idea of how the graves have been placed. The blue one in the back is a memorial to a famous rabbi. Here you see again the Hebrew inscription and the French inscription. So this is Rabbi Abner Israel Sarfati, and that is the rabbi whose memorial, that blue memorial, that is his, Rabbi Sarfati's. There was another famous rabbi buried here, and he has a fairly elaborate grave, as you can see. Inside Rabbi Sarfati's memorial, people light Yisker candles and leave them there, as you can see. And then we went to the market in Fez. And you've heard of Moroccan rugs? Here they are. I'll have another picture of a rug store a little bit later on. It's a very colorful place. This was taken in the Jewish synagogue in Fez. The gentleman here is a tour guide of a different tour. We were waiting our turn, and I could not get a picture of the Aron Kodesh and the rabbi's pulpit without him standing there. Here's the Aron Kodesh opposite the rabbi's pulpit in the synagogue in Fez. This is our tour guide, and he opened up this tile in the floor of the synagogue. This is the entrance to the mikveh in the synagogue. And here you have a better picture. This was Lior. This was our Jewish Israeli tour guide whose specialization is Morocco. And here, so you have the Aron Kodesh. This is our tour group, our guide, and the entrance to the mikveh. Oh my gosh, I have been muted the whole time. Let's see, or maybe that's, no, that's Casey. I think we're good. I took this photo of this little boy sitting on a pizza carton just outside the synagogue. I thought he was adorable, and I thought that was an interesting picture of a young man in Morocco. This is the other side of the gate to the Medina in on the far side of Fez. So you're on the outside looking at the gate to the Medina. And here you're on the inside looking out. Now, it's well worthwhile to note that Muslim architecture, their homes and so on, are oriented inward. You won't see very much on the outside, but look through the arch. This is an Andalusian architecture from Spain. Andalusian architecture is oriented outward. So you see a lot of covered porches and balconies. And of course, in the distance, you see a mosque. When you look at mosques, you will typically see on their roofs, you will see a staff with 3 balls and a crescent. The 3 balls represent Medina, Mecca, and Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. And the crescent is the symbol of Muhammad, of Allah. It's the crescent moon, with which we're all familiar. You see that, for example, in the Turkish flag. Here we are in the market, in the Souk in Fez, in the Souk. And this is a butcher with his customer. We walked through this market. I cannot describe to you the sights, the sounds, the smells as you walk through the center of the old city. I saw a camel's head, recently chopped off the camel. I saw donkey transports. That's all they have because cars won't fit through the Medina. They transport things on donkeys. Roosters and chickens still alive, waiting to be slaughtered. Another butcher shop. Produce, one stall on top of another. Maimonides lived in Fez for a while. Right now, it's a Moroccan restaurant, as you can see, but he did live in Fez for a short time. The Muslims revered Maimonides for his medicine. He was considered a very important doctor in his time. This is the inside. You could see it's a restaurant here and so on. The mosaic dates back to Maimonides' time. And here we have an etching of Maimonides on the wall. This was his home for a brief time when he lived in Morocco. Now we are at the Bu Inania Madrasa, very famous Muslim school. A madrasa is a Muslim school. This school was started in 1300. It is enormous. I can't tell you. We walked for that we walked the perimeter, and the perimeter was a good, I would say, 1.5 to 2 miles. And it has 14 doors. This is one of the doors. The madrasa is still in use today. Look at that. You can see the levels, you can see the detail. And all of the inscriptions are like the inscription I showed you earlier, to the glory of Allah.
Yes.
So here is an alcove in this madrasa. Another picture of the door, a little bit of a close-up so that you can see the detail work in the wood. Also, look at all the inscription and all the detail work on the walls and the mosaics on the walls. Okay, here we're back in the market. And as I said, look at all of these containers. This is fresh meat being stored in heavy fat. It was not exactly a pleasant sight, and it was a less pleasant smell. Down the way from that particular stall, we have this one, which gives you a sense of the variety in this market. These men are smoking, playing cards, and chatting. It was a slow business day in the market. But these men are actually pounding metal and making these pots and pans. Here you can see the textiles in the background, which are for sale. One thing on top of another in this market. Here we have women shopping. And here we have the donkey transports. This is how you have to transport goods in and out and through the market. This is an example of a rug, a very large rug. We did go to a rug store. Several of the people in our tour group bought rugs. And look at that rug. This is one rug. It's like huge and totally magnificent. Gives you some sense. They had all shapes and sizes and designs, colors. It was unbelievable. Here we have one of the workmen at work creating a beautiful Moroccan rug. Fez is also known for its tanneries. And here you have the various color pots for dyeing the tanned leather. Here you have the workers. They're working on leather. This is going to be a rose-colored jacket, probably. You could see all the various vats of color. Look at all those vats. Again, the site was very interesting. The smell was even more interesting. And we went to this tannery in Fez. This is one of the more famous tanneries in Fez. I bought a custom crafted jacket. They showed me this jacket. I told them I wanted it a little longer. I told them what kind of detail I wanted on it. And 3 days later, when I got to Marrakesh, there was my jacket. They had made a mistake. They had made this dark brown leather, and I asked them to check, and they went back to the order. They said they had made a mistake. They made me a brand new jacket. 2 days later, after I got back from the Berber Mountains, I had another jacket. Okay, Fez also has a great pottery tradition. And it's worthy to note that in order to get the fire hot enough in their kilns, they burn olive pits to produce the fire. Here's a gentleman, and he is laying out the pattern for what will become a table. They had some gorgeous, gorgeous pottery in this place. Look at this plate. Look at these plates. Look at this typical Moroccan shaped urn. Just gorgeous stuff. Check that out. You can see the detail. I bought this. This is a bellows for, to fan a fire if you have real wood in your fireplace. This bellows was over 300 years old. I paid about $200 US for it. It's sitting on my fireplace now here at home. Next, we made a brief stop in Meknes. I told you Meknes was a center of Jewish learning in its day. Well, briefly, it was the capital of Morocco. And as the capital of Morocco, it had like a state fair where 70 different countries participated. Annually, they had this fair, and the focus was on agriculture. They had huge granaries in Meknes, and this is part of one of the granaries. They also had stables enough for 2,000 horses. This is part of the stables. They also, in Meknes, they had water wells in order to withstand sieges. In other words, military sieges, they made sure they could get their water. Now, I have to tell you, these stables, you could see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 corridors. And they were very wide and very long to either side. And they were for the horses' stalls in these stables. Now, remember, Meknes was the capital of Morocco from the 1670s to the 1720s. The next place we visited was Rabat, the capital of Morocco since the early 20th century. Rabat means fortress, and Rabat looks very much like a capital city. It has wide boulevards and grand government buildings. The Moroccan flag is a green 5-pointed star. Green is the symbol for peace. It's also a lucky Moroccan or Muslim, excuse me, it's a lucky Muslim color. And it sits on a red field. So you've got the green star on the red field. and the red symbolizes the blood of Moroccans rising up and defending against colonialism. They had centuries and centuries of colonialism. This five-pointed star, as I mentioned, represents the 5 pillars of the Islamic faith. And the flag is flying everywhere, all over Rabat. On our way into the city, it was interesting. We passed a military convoy, and we also passed a lot of horse-drawn wagons and donkey carts. So the old meets the new in Rabat. We went to an Interfaith Center. That's what this is. It's an Interfaith Center, and we sat around this table. I'll explain in a minute what happened at this meeting that we had. The center was built out of a similarity between anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, where people are aware of otherness, okay? So this center was built to promote otherness, but I have to tell you, they have not made much progress. Our rabbi in our tour group participated in a dialogue with a Muslim representative and a Christian representative. But we felt that the dialogue was very superficial. The Muslim representative was fairly new on her job. And we had the feeling that the Christian representative was kind of minding her. And with her body language and facial expressions, she was keeping a very close tab on what the Muslim representative was saying. So the Muslim representative was very careful with her words and how she said things. Later in the day, we met a man named Andre Azoulay. Andre Azoulay is a Jew. He is from Essaouira, where we will go in a little bit. It's on the sea. It's a sea coastal port town. And it was a huge Jewish port in its day. Azoulay's project is to resurrect Essaouira. It is now a beach tourist town. It had really fallen on hard times, and he's trying to bring it back, and he's being fairly successful at it. And he's been promoting annually a huge music festival that's now very famous that takes place there. But Andre Azoulay is also the financial minister to the King of Morocco. And as such, we were lucky enough to have an audience with him. He said that the big problem in Morocco is that Israel is identified today with the Palestinian issue, and emotions are so strong that people cannot stay in the same room. People who are in favor of a two-state solution, people who are not. In his view, if Israel would take a step backward and the Muslims would take a step forward, he believes peace is possible, but not in the current Israeli environment. He said this in 2018, so you can imagine what his outlook must be today. He said that the Palestinian issue is what is creating anti-Semitic behavior and an anti-Semitism movement in Morocco today. So this is where we had our interfaith discussion. This was a gorgeous interfaith center. It is a fairly new building. This is a discussion. The lady in green with the long hair here was the Christian representative. The lady with the hijab is, of course, the Muslim representative. It's a beautiful building. This is a picture of my husband and myself. We are standing in front of the mausoleum of King Mohammed V. Mohammed V was the father of Hassan II, who built that mosque in Casablanca. And there are two other tombs in this mausoleum besides Mohammed V. One is Hassan II, the other is his brother. The columns you see in the background, they were brought from Velu Palace. The present king of Morocco is Mohammed VI, and he has more power in his parliamentary government than Queen Elizabeth has in hers, because the king of Morocco can decide if the head of the winning elected party is suitable or unsuitable for forming a party to govern Morocco. Queen Elizabeth has to accept what she's got. Mohammed V is known as the father of Moroccan independence. He was the king at the time in 1956 when Morocco gained its independence from France. He is also known as the savior of the Jews. When the Nazis came to Morocco, German and Italian troops threatened the king, and they wanted him to give up the Jews, and he said, "I have no Jews. I have only Moroccans." Here's a gentleman. This is all brass here, and he is polishing it to a high sheen. He does that every day. This is one of the guards outside of the tomb, or the mausoleum. And this is the mausoleum. You have to lean over a ledge in order to be able to see the tomb of Mohammed V, which is in the middle, and the tomb of Hassan II and his brother, because if you have to lean over to see it, you are bowing. And this is a guard on the inside. You can see the 5-pointed star and the red and the green. This is at one of the entrances to the grounds of the mausoleum. This is not a statue. This is a real live person who sits there all day long during his shift. He is on watch on a real horse. And next we went to Marrakech. Marrakech is a mix of the African and the Berber, but it is also the favorite place of the French designer Yves Saint Laurent. And Yves Saint Laurent created this beautiful garden. It's called the Jardin L Gardens, and it is quite extensive. And this was the labor of love of Yves Saint Laurent. There's an Yves Saint Laurent museum also in Marrakech. You go through, and it's a history of fashion shown in all of his creations over the decades. It's all of Yves Saint Laurent's history there. Again, the Jardin L Garden. This is just one part of it. This is the memorial to Yves Saint Laurent. He was cremated with his partner. Yves Saint Laurent was gay, and he and his partner are buried here in the Jardin L Garden. Marrakech is known as the Pink City. A lot of pink buildings, and it's very cosmopolitan. It has a very large square, and it's full of merchants hawking their wares and snake charmers, and I found it to be pretty touristy. Fez was not touristy at all by comparison to Marrakech. And then from Marrakech, we went into the Atlas Mountains, and we passed gorgeous gardens, and we stopped at a restaurant and an inn where we were served lunch, and we walked through the garden. This is a Berber maiden. Notice that she is wearing a red headdress. This advertises to the community that she's available for marriage. If she were wearing a black headdress, that would mean she was married. Berber is the name the Romans gave to the people in the mountains because they spoke an unfamiliar language. They called themselves Amazigans, people of freedom, Amazigans, and that is the Berbers. In their schools, they teach English, French, Berber, and Arabic, but they don't teach science in their schools. Children begin education at 7 years old, but girls only go until the 6th grade, and they only go to school half days. Their role in life is to make families and keep the house and keep the kitchen. Used to be that Berber young women did not go to school. But very recently, recently in the last 2 years, the king has decreed that Berber girls must go to school. Also, the government is now subsidizing student housing because to go to high school, you have to go away from your little village. There's no high school in every single village. So the government is subsidizing housing, and girls are just now beginning to go to high school in the Atlas Mountains. Berber women are eligible for marriage at age 14, and most marriages, even today, are arranged. It's only the younger generation today that is starting to adopt a love concept, that marriages should be based on love. A Berber woman's dowry typically is 4 camels. They have the Berbers, men and Berber women have only acquired certain rights since 2004. Up until then, they couldn't even have their own bank accounts. 87% of women over 40 among the Berber population are illiterate. 47% of the population, 57% of the Berber population excuse me, 57% of 57% of the female Berber population under 40 today is illiterate. Remember, they're only now starting to go to school. There has been a resurgence of ethnic pride and Berber ethnicity in the mountains. You see a lot of the young men going around with ball caps that say Amiziga on the back, that means Berber. And the Berber language is now being taught in schools, not only in the mountains, but the Berber language has been decreed to be the 2nd language of Morocco. This is very significant because the 2nd language of Morocco had been French. And here you see a Berber village. It's usually made of mud bricks. This is the valley that we drove through. We drove through high up into the mountains. There are 3 ranges of mountains in Morocco. We were in the high Atlas. There's the middle Atlas, and there's the Rif. Those are the other mountain ranges. You see camels here. This is waiting, taking a break. We went to the mausoleum of a very famous rabbi who had served in the Berber Mountains, in the High Atlas Mountains. And these are all the rabbis that used to minister to Jews in the mountains among the Berbers. Look at those faces. Here we have the tomb of this particular rabbi, Shlomo ben Lachnes. Here's another one, Sada el-Fassi. And here we are in the mountains among the Berbers. This was the view from the Casbah, the inn that we stayed at while we were in the mountains. And of course, you see the mud brick houses and the mosque. If you look closely, you can see the satellite dish, you see the goat, see the donkey, typical Berber home. So we were in our car, which you could see the side mirror there, and here comes the donkey train. The road that we were traveling on, by the way, was only 2 years old. As I said, only 2 years old. But you could tell they do have electricity here. You can see the wires. They have electricity. They have satellite dishes. They have mud brick homes. We stopped. I had to make a bathroom stop. And we convinced our driver to try to get us in to the exclusive Richard Branson Casbah Tamadot, which is hidden here in the High Atlas Mountains. He was flying over it one year with his mother, and his mother looked down, and he was flying over Morocco, and she said that would be an excellent spot for a secluded spa. And this place is over the top gorgeous. Our guide told the guard, who did not want to let us in, he said that we wanted to look at the inn, at the Casbah, because we were considering staying there on our next trip to Morocco. This is the swimming pool. There's only room for 28 guests in this Casbah, and this tower over here is for a family of 6. The rest are regular rooms. But again, only 28 guests at a time. I can also tell you that the ladies' room that I went to was by far and away the best ladies' room I have ever been in the world. It was gorgeous. And I've been quite a few places in this world. Up until I saw this ladies' room, I thought the nicest ladies' rooms I'd ever seen and the cleanest were in Israel. But this one was over the top. Here you have a photo. You see the tower for the family of 6. That's if you want to have a private family gathering. This is the meditation pool in the Casbah, where you recline on the couches and you look at the pool with all the flowers floating in it and you meditate. It's spectacular. This is the library. You can see the chess pieces. Look at all the ornate artwork. And of course, the fireplace. It gets very cold in the mountains at night. and they are ready. So you can see the logs ready for burning in the fireplace. It's a very cozy room. Casbah Tamadot, Sir Richard Branson's Moroccan retreat. I want you to look at this contrast. These are the guys, jeans, modern truck, two schoolboys. He's got a backpack, you know, just normal little kids. And on the same street, you see this, the woman who is totally veiled. This is your classic photo. I actually took this of a Berber gentleman with his village in the background. We had lunch at this place. This place was actually on TripAdvisor, and it was a wonderful, wonderful lunch that we had here, overlooking the Atlas Mountains. We also were overlooking a woman who was hanging out her laundry to dry on her roof. And this is our Berber gentleman getting ready for the tea ceremony. And with this tea ceremony, they hold the spouts very high and let the tea go into the glasses. And they say a special ritual. A little bit, you know how the British like to serve tea and they have a ritual? Well, this is the Moroccan ritual for serving tea. And then we went down into the village and we saw this young lady. I don't even think she was 20, but she already had a toddler, and she is making bread, and she does this every day. And she's sitting in front of her house. This is the inside of her house. And you can see, remember I told you that Muslim homes are oriented inward. So in her home, she has a very beautiful cabinet full of crockery and silver and pottery and flowers. She also has, you can see to the left, she has a sizable linen closet full of quilts. And this is her living space, which converts to a bedroom at night. This is her kitchen. This is the Berber alphabet, which you can see is distinctly different from the Moroccan calligraphy or French or Spanish, which would be Roman calligraphy. This has all sorts of different influences. You have Greek, you have Greek again, you have Latin, you have Muslim, you have Berber, you have all sorts of influences. Here's Greek again at the top. You have all sorts of influences going on in this alphabet. Here you can see the difference between Berber and Arabic. On our way to Essaouira, we saw this very interesting site. Okay, these are argon trees. You may have heard of argan oil. Well, the only place these trees grow with fruit on them is between Marrakesh and Essaouira in Morocco, and some a little bit north of Essaouira. Now, there are some argan trees in Israel and other places in the Middle East, but not argan trees that bear fruit. What they send the goats up into the trees, and the goats eat the fruit, and the shell of the fruit falls to the ground, and they collect the shells. And the shells are where the oil is. They're very oily. and they are sorted here. This is a women's cooperative. All these women are widows, and it's a women's cooperative, and here they are sorting the pits and the shells from the fruit and grinding them. You could see she's grinding and grinding. She does this all day long, and she is collecting oil. That's argan oil being freshly made. Now, my husband and I each took a turn at grinding, and I'm telling you, to do that all day long is very hard work. You also find argan trees, by the way, in Mexico, but not the trees with the fruit. The only place you find the fruit, as I said, is between Marrakesh and Essaouira. And the trees themselves last hundreds of years. Argan is prized for cosmetics. That would be a cold press of argan. And also in cooking. That would be a hot press of argan. We went to another cemetery here in Essaouira. This is the Jewish cemetery, and you can see how extensive it is. It's one of several Jewish cemeteries in Essaouira. As I mentioned, Essaouira had a sizable Jewish community. Now, Essaouira is a port, and it's a fishing port. So here you see your fishing boats, your larger ones. Your smaller ones are all blue. It's a law. They have to be painted blue. Essaouira was a huge trading port. It was primarily a Jewish town. The Jewish people were a majority over the Muslims in its heyday. And the French built their port in Casablanca because the Essaouira port was closed on Shabbat. Here you see our fishing nets and fishing buoys for casting nets on the water. Here you see all the some of the smaller fishing boats. Again, it's a law. They have to be blue. Don't know why, but it's a law. Now, Essaouira is also quite the tourist town. And this is not just our group. There were many tour groups here. But in the background, if you look closely, you will see fresh fish, fresh off the boat. These are sardines. And you have a gentleman who is playing a Moroccan flute, a wind instrument. And as I said, it's a bit of a tourist place. So these are some of the things for sale in Essaouira along the streets. Essaouira is a beach town, and as such, it attracts a lot of tourists. This is a painting, and I photographed this because this is a typical street in Essaouira, and you have the ladies draped in their jalabas walking down the street. Because it's on the seaside, Essaouira also has a battlement, and this is to protect Morocco from Europeans. This battlement was built in the 1760s. These are original cannon. Your Moroccan shoes. 10 dirhams for a pair of shoes. This shows you how narrow the walkways are and how it's full of goods for sale. Also, you can see there's a restaurant in there. Sign for the restaurant. This is the courtyard of a very beautiful jewelry shop in Essaouira, where I bought my necklace. And the jewelry shop looks out. You go around 3 sides. It looks out on this courtyard. These are some of the things that were for sale. As you can see, it's kind of touristy stuff. But and here's the Hamsa, for example, with a 6-pointed star. Notice that. So you have the Berber Hamsa and the 6-pointed star. He had gorgeous stuff, gorgeous jewelry for sale. And my final slide, my final picture, this is the synagogue in Marrakesh. They don't usually have a minyan, but because our tour group came, they did have a minyan, and they celebrated Kabbalat Shabbat, and they served us a lovely meal in the courtyard outside. The women, of course, were relegated to the women's balcony, and were not expected to do anything but gossip. There were very few sidurim, there are very few prayer books there, and not a whole lot of seating either. The women were not encouraged necessarily to go up there. They were supposed to be in the kitchen at home preparing the Shabbat meal. That is my final photo from my Jewish trip to Morocco. I hope you've enjoyed this. I know it went a little long, but I will tell you that Morocco is a fascinating country, and it was a historical and a spiritual journey. And I thank you very much. Have a good day.